Now let's turn to Al Collins. You've met Al before. He's been on the show several times. And tonight he's going to talk about detailing models. Al?
Okay, so we are inundated with detailing tips, which is a good thing. So this is the second segment I've done, and I'll continue on from where I left off. I kind of like to do things around a project, and then what I pick up or learn as I'm doing that project, I can pass along. So I'm working away on my wharf. I'm going to sort of quickly go through this picture. There's a dock crane on here, and I don't like to criticize kits or manufacturers, but there's a couple of points I got to bring up on this, and I ended up making a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So Rusty Stumps, some of you may know, Walter Gillespie was his name. I think he's retired the second time now. I believe he's 86, so he'll probably stay retired. He did some really nice kits and some excellent 3D printing. Someone else took over the kit. Let me just back up here one. So this kit, the basic part of the structure is it's just an O scale. It's 3x12. Doesn't matter what scales it in, a C/12. But if for some reason, instead of using strip wood, they laser cut some sheet wood. And I'm not even 100% sure what the sheet wood was. The unfortunate thing is that it was oversized. So I'm kind of doing this for a reason, and I'm not doing it to be nasty or negative. But when you laminate these four pieces together, it's supposed to be 250 thou or 1/4 inch in O scale. Well, it's 30 thousandths of an inch over, and that was even with putting some serious weight to make sure there was no glue expansion in the joint. So we end up with a piece of fairly prominent structure on this kit that was way too large. And then the 3D printing parts that were extremely brittle, so to make them less susceptible to breaking and falling apart, they increased the thickness of the 3D printed part. The unfortunate thing is they increased it on both sides, so that decreased the inside part. So instead of 1/4 inch or 250 thou, they came down to 232 thou. So we're out a 1/16 of an inch, and on a really kind of nice fine detail being the operative word, we're 1/16 of an inch, and the manufacturer, I asked the question, he said, well, just sand it down. Sanding 1/16 of an inch off, that doesn't make sense to me. However, we forge ahead. As I've mentioned before, I'm a great proponent of making fixtures or jigs for whatever you do. This spray adhesive, I got it at Michael's. It's amazing. A lot of the spray adhesives are kind of spattery or goopy. This comes out in a very fine spray. You spray it and it dries almost instantly. You put it on, smooth it down with your hand, and it's perfectly flat on whatever you decide to build your models on. So we just throw together a quick little fixture to hold everything in place when you're laminating bits and pieces together. So to take care of the 3D printed parts that weren't going to fit, I sort of cut them down, butchered them a little bit, and I got some of this laser board, which is bear with me for a minute here. It's called Polyback, and what this stuff is, it's what all the laser kit guys use. It comes in 11 thou, 15 thou, 24 thou, and it's the backing for arborite. It's dead flat. It's very accurate, very stable. And there's a place in Toronto you can buy it called Wonderosa, and you can buy a 4x8 sheet for $9.60. You can make a lot of little HO or O scale parts. So I'm sure with a little research you'll find it. So I cut them out. You can cut them with scissors or an X-Acto knife or razor blade, painted them up, rusted them a bit, and substituted those for the 3D printed parts that no longer fit. I really like NBW castings. I use them a lot, and they make, again, details. We're talking about details. They make a really effective detail on anything you're putting together. One of the parts I decided to use was the base of the legs for this crane. Those are supposed to be washers and bolt heads or nuts, and they're just blobs. So to make that a little nicer, just trimmed them off and filed them, drill a hole in, and substituted NBWs, the same thing, to give it that little detail. The reason that you laminate the boom on this is that the pulleys and the ropes that are the actual hoisting mechanism go through the boom and the arm on it. So that's why it's important that those members are accurate, because you have to laminate the four of them together, and then the castings have to sit over top. The legs at the back, the braces are just strip wood, 1/4 inch, 12-inch O-scale strip wood. So you can end up making a reasonably nice model with not a whole lot of extra effort, just by using some of the materials I mentioned, and a little bit of patience, and you can resurrect the models. Don't be afraid to do something like that. If the kit doesn't exactly go together the way anticipated, you can quite often save it. All right, so I've mentioned train troll before. Again, I love these. Again, very, very fine laser work. It absolutely amazes me, having been in this hobby for so many years, where, I mean, I remember getting stuff, they just drew the outlines on a piece of wood and you had to cut it yourself, but now everything is done for you. This is one of his, this is a fish card actually, but coal card I hadn't finished yet, but really nice, goes together well, great detail on the laser etching and the nail holes and everything, all done with lasers, and easily goes together and makes a nice little detail, a placeable, as my friend Jerry would say. So this is something different. In building a wharf, there's a lot of piles, and I don't know if anytime I've ever tried to do pilings with Dowling's usually maple or birch or something hard, and it doesn't take stain at all. The stain runs away from it. So I got some basswood dowels from Rick Hunter. He had a few extra pieces he let me try. Only 1/4 inch, but the basswood dowels, he uses them in his trestle kits. I'm not sure if he's going to have some available or not. You can talk to him about that. But the basswood dowels take stain beautifully, but they only come in 1/4 inch, and I wanted something a little larger. So this is basically a big pencil sharpener. This is a 3/8 of an inch dedicated to a 3/8 of an inch dowel. You feed it with some basswood scraps. I know a guy where I can get lots of basswood scraps, but you can buy basswood at the lumber yards. Basically, you cut a square 1/16 of an inch larger than the dowel you want, and you make dowels. And you can make a dowel in about 30 seconds. You just put it on a drill with a socket, square drive socket, and run a piece of sandpaper down it, and you've got 3/8 inch perfect dowel. And in 20 minutes, you can make enough dowels to make all the piers you want for if you're building a wharf. There is a more sophisticated dowel maker that goes from 1/16, I believe, up to 3/4 of an inch for different scales. A little more expensive. That was $75, by the way, that thing. So I'm finished with it. So if anybody wants to rent it, let me know. And it works great. And you can make all the dowelings you want. Another little tidbit, if you like, butcher's twine. This is butcher's twine, as you can see. The nice thing about butcher's twine is it's 100% cotton, which means it'll stain. You can stain it very easily. I found it in 1 millimeter and 1.5 millimeter, which again translates to somewhere around 2 inches in O scale, which is perfect for dock scenes, tying up piers like they've done here. So let's go a little further with this wharf that I've been working on, that those buildings I showed you last time sit on. I was surfing the internet, and I found this report that was done in 2018, and it's of the Castle Wharf in British Columbia. And Larry, if you're on there, push your bar and tell me what the name of that railway was again. I guess he's not there. Anyway, it's a relatively well-known railway in BC that used this wharf. The nice thing is that they were going to rebuild this, and in doing so, the architects or the engineers drew sketches of the wharf, and it gives the dimensions, the bay sizes, the bent, the distance between the bents, the number of piers in the bents, and all the dimensions of all the lumber. So it made a great working drawing. So going back to the fixture idea again, I started building components, and you can see those basswood dowels, how nicely they take stain. And as I mentioned before, this really is a scratch built project, because this is the extent of the drawings I had. And I spent most of my time scratching my head because I didn't know what I was going to do next. So if you can see on this, you can see that on the right-hand side of the picture, the one pier is a little bit longer than the others. So I just made up a pile of these, and I made a big pegboard, roughly of the area where I wanted to build this wharf. And I just like a kid's erector set, I just started plugging them in. I had like a matrix. The bay sizes, if you like, on this particular wharf was 8 by 12. So I scaled this out at 8 by 12 and just started assembling bits and pieces of a wharf. Once I kind of got it where I wanted it, it needed to be square before I went much further. So gravity is always your friend. And if you know, any foundation of anything you build, even if it's a cottage or a house, you need to be square. So squaring it up to start with, then you can build anything from there on up. This is with all the cross bracing on. I think you could probably drive a Volkswagen over this. It's extremely tough. Starting to do some of the decking, and you can see where I set in those buildings I showed you a couple of weeks ago. I've set into the structure. And there's how the floor of the buildings, that allows you to do the buildings on the workbench, and then marry them together with the wharf at some point. And there is mistakes. And the cat hair, we have cats and dogs, so there's nothing I do that doesn't have cat or dog hair in it somewhere. So now the next step, once I got that all built, it's virtually impossible to pour or put water of any sort in around all those. I don't think there's about 100 piles in there. So I invested in a Dowling saw. This is an extremely flexible little saw, and it's designed specifically for cutting dowels, and it has no kerf. It's a pull saw, so it cuts on the pull stroke. Zero kerf. So now you can, or what I did, I don't know if it's what I recommend or not, I went and cut them all off, and it did a really nice job. It cut them off perfectly flush. Then I can experiment with coloring and watering, and that's a whole other discussion, how to make water look like water, and then put the wharf back on. And after building that and weighting it down and putting all the cross bracing on, it was a pretty tough freestanding structure. On each corner, I drilled and put a little peg in, just so I had one corner, or four corners, one spot to locate it when I glued it back together. Now you can do your water. This is the base is Mod Podge, several layers of Mod Podge. The wave action is artist gel. And now you can set the Wharf back in while the gel is wet, but you don't get any creep and you don't have to worry about pouring. You can just set the Wharf back into the water. And actually, again, we use some weights, but when it dries, the gel is actually a pretty good adhesive, and it's pretty solid. So let's go on little details. Daryl sent me some details to work with, as he promised and I promised. The first one is this little Model T truck. I think he spent more time on instructions perhaps than he did on laser cutting, but the instructions are amazing. Very, very fine laser work. The white stuff I think is about 15 thou laser board, and the brown is 24 thou. And it's the same stuff I was talking about before. That I like airbrush. I love my airbrush, so I airbrush everything. It gives me more control. And a little bit of weathering on the signs that are perfect fit as you start assembling them. Going back to square again, especially something like this, if you don't have a square foundation, by the time you get to the roof or the finishing touches, it doesn't fit. So make things, start square and you'll finish square. Just a little tip on the side when you're putting tabs, gluing little tabs like this, put the glue in the hole, not on the tab, because if you put it on the tab, then you stick it in the slot, it wipes off and leaves a big blob of glue that you've got to contend with. So this is humorous. This is a Kleenex. When I was, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old, I had a paper route. And I can remember I used to get 35 cents a week is what the paper cost. So this one fella, when I went collecting my weekly money for my paper route, he always had a runny nose. And he always took out a Kleenex to blow his nose, but he separated it. So there was 2 or 3 layers in a Kleenex, and he would actually pull the layers apart so he could get 2 nose blows off 1 Kleenex tissue. But the nice thing is when you take that, it gives you a very, very fine tissue paper that does a wonderful job of a tar paper, canvas, or fabric roof of anything you're doing. And it's thin enough that when it's wet with paint, it'll form to the roof lines, and then you can just trim it off afterwards. So makes a nice job, makes a nice roof. I do this on all passenger cars or cabooses or that kind of thing. Daryl, this is not for the faint of heart. Doing these fenders is a challenge. It's well worth it because once you're finished, it's a pretty spectacular model. I had a little bit of difficulty, to be honest. So I ended up reverting to my other hobby, which is antique cars for real. And I just glued this all up with a whole bunch of CA glue and then filed it down just like it was body filler and put a little paint on it. And they ended up just fine. One of the details, again, details is these little support rods or stay rods for the running boards on this, which need to be flattened on the end. I've had a lot of, well, not a lot, but I have had trouble with phosphor bronze. If you get too aggressive trying to flatten it, it shatters. So I found this in the basement, and these, as they say, are Christmas hangers, Walmart, but they're extremely soft and malleable. So you can beat the snot out of them with a hammer and they just flatten out. They don't break, and then you can bend them and they don't fracture when you bend them. and not the best picture in the world. And there's our complimentary cat hair. And you can make a nice flat surface, as you can see, for those support rods. I just threw the picture of this brush in. This is another one of my favorite tools, is a very, very fine pointed, they call them liner brushes, but you can see there's a whole lot of bristle. So you can carry a lot of paint in a little brush like that. And you can paint all the edges of the windows, and you can paint around the doors, and you can paint the edge of the fenders or whatever, without ever stopping and starting, putting more paint in the brush. And for any of you who have ever seen any automotive pinstriping, the pinstriper brushes, the handle is about a half the length of the bristles, so they can go from one end of a fender on a real car, a real antique car. They can go from one end of a fender to the other end of a fender without ever having to put more paint in their brush. So there's the finished product with a little bit of weathering. Well worth the effort, and a nice detail for a foreground model. Crates, Daryl's crates. This is his COVID collection. You can see we got hand sanitizer and toilet paper and N95 masks and craft dinner and the Ark of the Covenant. And if you're kind of silly like me and you take all the things apart, then you got a jigsaw puzzle as well to try to figure out how to pull it all back together. And the same here, these frames are not all the same size. So another little trick, I have an endless supply of these stick-it discs. When you want to make something square, instead of holding it in your hand and trying to square it up with a file or a nail card, stick it onto a flat surface and take the wood to the sandpaper, instead of taking the sandpaper to the wood. You can get a nice straight edge. Another little tick, not tick. Let's put those together. Trick. Piece of scrap, just a scrap strip wood, sharpen it to a point. You can use it for putting glue under an edge or something like that. You can use it to clean the excess glue off, and then when the end gets lousy, you just carve another 1/8 of an inch off, and it makes a great gluing tool. And there's their finished ode to COVID and the Ark of the Covenant. Again, details, the little rope handles on the end, for what it takes to put them on. It makes a nice detail. So our wharf is coming. It's a long way to go yet, but it's coming together. And we just flash through a few pictures here. There's that crane now that we resurrected that fits right into the dock scene. And just bear with me a few more minutes. Again, details and my amazement at what's available in the marketplace now that's all done with laser work. This is a little side dump hopper car made by a company called Mount Blue. And they don't come flat in a box anymore. They come flat in a plastic bag. Everything's in there. I think these are like $26 American. And they're all designed to fit on Bachmann ON30. I heard Jim mention earlier about ON30. This is a Bachmann ready to run ON30. And they have a modular undercarriage on them. So they're box cars, they're flat cars, they're caboose, they're gondolas. They all have exactly the same undercarriage, and with a little bit of imagination and a little bit of paint and a little bit of airbrushing, you can turn that into a pretty spectacularly detailed undercarriage that came in the box. The only thing is I shaved the plastic floor off and put some wooden floor on to make it more realistic. Again, details, the pillow blocks, the latches, all that stuff is laser cut, and you can make beautiful kits with it. And if this is a train troll, which is one step more. Again, all these little latches and all these little mechanisms, all these little hinges are all 11th thou laser cut bits and pieces. And if you're really a little anal, you can make them with the doors open. So that's what I got for tonight. Hopefully there's some questions. It's been pretty quiet out there.
I've got one for you, Al.
Sure.
You talked about when you were building the truck, you talked about the problem with the fenders. Could you tell me again how you made the fenders?
Well, I wouldn't say it's not necessarily a problem, Jim. It's
They're not simple though. You can go ahead. They're a complicated bit of kit to do that way. We did them that way, so we couldn't 3D print them either. So yeah, so you can blast it all you want, Al.
well, I was hoping you'd check it. They're flat. So again, it's flat in the box. So the inner fender is basically a. Let me go back.
What I was really interested in is how you made them solid, or how you put the glue on them where it toughened them up enough where you could file them to the dimensions you needed. I've never done that.
Hell, neither did I before. So if you take a look at that fender,
You
we
need
won't
to
comment.
share again, Al. You need to share again.
How do I do that? Oh. Okay, you'll have to walk me through that.
You have your screen share button at the bottom, Al.
Just like you did before. Click the green button at the bottom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
it's
click
not
on
the green button's not there.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. I had to go back into Zoom.
Yeah.
There we go. So okay, first of all, let's not look at the fender on the right because it's not quite as good as the one on the left. So the fender is flat, so you've got to put a curve in it. And that stuff, because it's not really wood, it's a, what did I say, a poly kind of base. You can bend it in the palm of your hand, or you can roll it around a dowel or screwdriver handle, and it will hold a shape. Now the inner fender is flat, but you've got to put a curve in it, and you got to curve it in two directions. You've got to curve it towards the front, and you've got to curve it towards the other part of the fender. And then you got to try and edge glue it all the way along. And what I tried doing a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and then it would stick to my fingers, and then it would stick to whatever I was doing. So basically, to be honest, Jim, I just kept putting glue on it until, and I'm exaggerating, but I just kept putting, glue on it until it stayed where I wanted. And then I just took some, actually, I have some of those little Riffler files that Paul was talking about earlier. Not nearly as coarse as that. I have some very fine ones. And I just like Bondo on my 34 Ford, I just started smoothing it out and a couple of coats of paint.
So correct me if I'm wrong.
Couple of words to Daryl and.
Yeah. That particular piece, that part 27, or the inner double compound curve, that's the key to the whole thing. In the instructions, it's kind of hard to show that, but if you don't get that compound curve exact, and that's what you got to do, is go back and forth, and it will eventually line up. But you got to keep curving and bending a little bit, and the polyback is a little bit stiff that way for the thickness of it. You can also try heating the polyback. Works good if you heat it with a heat gun as well. It gets very pliable.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I hadn't.
So that's laser board.
Yeah, it's what they call laser board, basically. Yeah.
The resin impregnated paper.
Yeah, that's the polyback. Yeah.
And like I say, what it's for is the backing for arborite.
So what did you use for Bondo? That's where I'm confused. What?
I just use cyanoacrylate glue.
A thick one?
Yeah, the thicker one.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess, well, you guys have Home Depot the same as we do. The Home Depot sells Gator brand cyanoacrylate, which,
Okay.
sorry,
Gorilla.
Gorilla. What did I say? Gator. Gorilla.
Okay.
Yeah, Gorilla. And it's
Well,
it
Jim's
does-
in Florida. It might be Gator brand.
Yeah, there you go. So that was the challenging part. The rest of it was fantastic. And this is not a deterrent. It's just it's a challenging part, which is fun. You know, if you didn't want to be challenged, then it would be an Athearn boxcar, right?
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with Athearn boxcars. Don't get me wrong.
No, it was a nice job and a great way to do it. I just never tried that before.
Yeah, just
Anybody
a-
else?
Al,
Yeah.
I had a question about your jig for the piles. The one jig you showed had some couple of pieces of wood sticking up that were part of the jig, and then the pile was kind of leaning up against them. It was one where you showed the basic form of the jig, if you will, or the fixture, but it had a couple of pieces sticking up, and I didn't know if those were just the scratch pieces and you scratch wood, or if the pieces sticking up actually served a function. And it just kind of caught my eye here. Yeah, well, actually I think it's like the next one down, but this one would probably work. Yeah. Okay. I see where you're coming across. The middle one here, the middle jig. At the top, you've got those two sticking up. Was there a reason for on the
two
left
little-
side of that pile?
The two little pieces stick. I'm not with you.
Yeah, okay, you've got the middle pile going up here. And
Yeah.
if you'll notice at the top on the left side and then on the mid, on that cross piece going across, I understand why you've got those two sticking up, because that serves a definite function to help hold that cross piece in place. But I didn't understand in the middle jig here why you had the pieces kind of standing on end, if you will, towards the
Oh.
top and then towards the middle. Was there a specific reason for that? Because if so, that's a thing about jigs that I'm not familiar with.
Okay, well, so if we're looking at the same picture here at the extreme top left corner, you can see where there's a cross brace goes in. And then there's one at the bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah,
So
it's kind
that's-
of in the middle of the one that we're looking at.
Yeah, but I just haven't got a cross brace in there. So there's
Okay,
there's another jig where I didn't have the bracing going across 3 piles. I only had the bracing going across 2 piles. So the cross brace would go from that center point down across. Which
okay,
I don't know how to make the pointer work.
yeah. Okay, I understand what you're saying though, and that answers the question. I just did not understand when I saw this come by the first time.
Bless you.
Yeah,
What's
this
going on?
little fixture was multi-purpose. It was because if you look at the next picture, so you can see how I did these, because now they go end to end. I can put where the cross bracing comes across to the right, that'll go into the extreme left of the other one. So
I totally understand what you're saying now. I didn't catch it in the jig when we went through the first time. When you said that they were multi-purpose, that answers the question, so.
Yeah.
Hey, Al, I noticed that you built that jig, you put graph paper down first. I assume you actually used that?
That's why I'm in 1/4" scale, because I got 1/4" graph paper. I can do everything.
Where can I find 1/87th graph paper?
Do they make 1/8" graph paper? I don't know. I'm sure that's close enough.
Yes, they do make 1/8" graph paper. I use it.
Yeah. I just That's how
Oh, I
I
guess my
start.
question, once you have the jig made, are you using the graph paper to help making the jig, or while you're making the product the jig's for?
No, I use that to, I make the jig based on the graph paper. I use the graph paper as a, well, I don't know what the right word is. But anyway, the answer to your question is yes. I use the graph paper as a matrix, for lack of a better word. And then I design the components based on that. And you can see that. So I'm using 1/4-inch dowel. So that's a 12-inch dowel, which just happens to be one square. So you can see where the dark lines are on this one, which is just a fine tip marker. So that's where I would start. That's my drawing of my bent for the trestle here. And then I'd start gluing little blocks of wood on based on that drawing on the graph paper.
Yeah, I
That's
see.
something-
And Paul just suggested you can shrink or enlarge graph paper for whatever scale you're working in on a
Oh.
printer.
Yeah, there's a good idea. Never thought of that. There's another little thing I've done. If you're only like, so this little jig I made here, I only had to make 8 of these trestle bents for the trestle leading up. I don't like working on wax paper. So if you've got an old can of high gloss clear, I just spray the graph paper with clear, and that'll give you enough of a protection to build 3 or 4 jigs where the glue won't stick like it sticks to paper. I mean, you get a little bit of white glue slopping out onto a piece of graph paper and it ruins it. The paper sticks to the basswood. But if you give the graph paper 3 or 4 good coats of gloss clear, then you're not going to get paper sticking to your jig, to your trestle.
Anybody else have any questions for Al?
Well,
Al, you were using butcher's twine. Do you find you have to wax it, or does it fuzz up at all, or is that just mixed in?
No, it's
You don't have to add extra cat hair to it to fuzz it up, or?
I have no, well, let me put it this way. I have no problem with cat hair.
Yeah.
But no, it works really well. And I guess it's just 100% pure cotton. And I tried all kinds of stuff. I tried, some little fine macrowave, arty's farty store stuff and jute, and it all fuzzes up. But this stuff just, can't find the picture I want now.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I don't think they make it in HO scale.
Right.
Yeah. There, that's what I'm looking for. There, you can see that all I did was I use Rick Stain for everything. That's just I just dipped that in the bottle and shook it around and took it out and let it dry.
Nice.
You may find in time that dust will stick to it. You're building ships, sailing ships. So all your lines, once you've had it on a windowsill for a while, you start finding fuzz. What the people do, they use these little blocks of beeswax and run that over the line, or run them through between your fingers on some beeswax, and that'll cure that.
When I did the piers on my wharf, I used white glue over it after I stained it. I don't have the fuzzies at all.
But I want dust on my rope. Anyway, it's good. And you can, I mean, there's 200 feet in there for $10 or something. That's a lot of wharfs.
It is.
Have you decided an approach on the barnacles, or are you going to add barnacles to your?
Well, I scaled a barnacle, and I figured from 2 feet back, you're not going to see it anyway. So I just painted it. I've seen, there's things that when you're modeling that you can, I don't know. I kind of just stained it. I can't really tell. They're not the best photographs, but a little bit of stain.
You can do it with sand.
You can, I've seen some done with sand. I've seen it done with pepper. I've seen it done with, sometimes when you go too far on the details, it doesn't look as good as if you didn't do it at all. See that? There's some barnacles, little black spots.
I believe Jason Jensen has a whole video on how to do the barnacles, but they look to me like a little out of scale.
I saw it, I saw that video and I figure those barnacles are about the size of baseballs. I mean, how big is a barnacle? And in
It's
real
about a
life,
I was just looking at that.
barnacles-
I just Googled that and they're about a half an inch to 1 inch. So you're 20 thousandths of an inch in your scale.
Yeah, so exactly. So find me something that's 20 thousandths of an inch kind of round to simulate a barnacle. And that's in O scale. And I think I saw that one you were talking about, Chris. And yeah, they, like I say, those barnacles were the size of baseballs. Maybe not quite that big, but they're pretty coarse. Anyway, it's fun, and there's a lot to. I haven't even started detailing this yet. I haven't even finished designing it. I don't even know what I'm going to do next at the back. A back part here, I haven't figured. Now I got to start building the landform to match the dock. I think that's
What did you put underneath your planking?
It's just glued to the stringers.
But I see.
Oh, I'm sorry. Back there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I did this whole thing backwards. I built the buildings and the floor on.
Laser board.
Well.
Cardboard.
No, it's late or a gator board, but it's not. It's a different company and it's wood. It's not plastic or paper on it's foam and it's quarter inch, but it's a wooden finish.
Right. That's gator board has the wooden finish.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what it is, and I like
Okay.
that because it's very stable.
Stable, yeah.
I build all my models. Every model I've ever built, I build on that stuff. And unfortunately, the only source I found for it is Micromart, and they sell it in little pieces, and it's cost a fortune. I found it at one, I think maybe either Timonium or.
If you have.
Yeah, there's a guy at Timonium selling it, and also I've gotten some from Amazon in bigger sizes than Micromart has.
With the wooden surface on it?
Yeah.
I think it might have the plastic surface.
Al,
Yeah, I like the
all you have
wooden
to do,
surface.
Al, all you have to do is ask me. It's called out in Brampton. You can buy it in 5x10 sheets, any size you want, and sometimes they'll even cut it for you for a small charge.
But that's not wood. It's not.
Yeah, it is.
Gator, it's
It
true
is.
gator foam.
Really?
Yes,
Mhm.
I built a whole layout with this stuff, and
Well, I was under the impression that, because Larry had mentioned that to me, and I was under the impression that was.
no, you have to ask the right people.
Yeah,
You can get it.
well,
You can get it through a company called Uline as well.
Yeah,
You have to buy.
lot
You
of
have to buy
stuff.
5 sheets.
I buy a lot of stuff from Uline. Anyway, that's what it is.
Yeah.
To answer
Or buy-
the original question, it's very stable. It's wood. It takes glue. It takes paint. It works great. So I built that first. I built the buildings, and then I started building the wharf to hold the buildings up. And now I got to start building some rocks somewhere at the back. I haven't figured that part out yet. It'll come to me.
The
can help
report
you
on the
there.
wharf that you wanted earlier, that's out in BC near Caslow. It was on the Caslow and Slocan Railroad, which was put in the early days before CP took it over and standard gauged it.
Yeah, it was a narrow gauge railway. Anyway, it's just a fluke that I found that engineering study to rebuild the wharf. So, okay, I guess I taken enough time. Let me,
Al, I appreciate it so much, and I hope when you get a little further along, you'll come back and show us how you're doing.
I've lost my arrow to stop sharing. Somebody else will have to, hey?
You're done.
There you go.
Yeah, well, when I get a little further on, I'll let you know, and we'll do,
Okay. Thanks again. I really do appreciate it. Modeling is just fantastic.
oh, my pleasure. Like I said before, I think one of the biggest disappointments in modeling over the years was people not willing to share what they were doing. And the subsequent discussions are great. Yeah, I learned something.
I learn something every night. Thanks again, Al.